Hey everyone, Brandon from Grizzly Works RC. In this video, I'm going to be going over the installation of the Grizzly Works RC flex extensions for the SCX24. Let's go ahead and open the bag up and see what we get. So we have two rear extensions, two front extensions, some 2mm spacers to help with the suspension from binding. They don't have to be used on every shock, just if you have an issue with binding after the installation. You put these on the upper mounts, which we'll go over on this truck, and they'll give you the extra or the angle correction that you need to keep the shocks from binding. You're also going to get 4 8mm M1.4 screws. Alright, tools you're going to need are a 4mm driver for your wheel nuts, and then a 1.3mm hex for your screws. Alright, let's go ahead and get into it. We're not even going to have to remove the body for this because everything is down low here. So first thing you got to do is get your wheels removed. Alright, so on the front, just have to turn your knuckle a little bit and go ahead and remove the lower portion of the shock. You're going to take your front mount, or your front extension here, and go ahead and run a screw, run a screw through that front hole. And then this will go right back where that suspension was mounted before. And you're going to want to get this a little bit snug, but not tight. You want this to be able to move. That's what gives you your extra flex out of here and your extra articulation. So you can run it a little bit tighter or a little bit looser depending on how fast you want it to actually be able to move. And then all you're going to do after that is thread your shock into that rear hole. And this one, just go until it's tight, and then you're good. And that's it for the front. And on the rear, just as simple. Go ahead and remove your shock. Take one of your rear extensions, run your screw through that front hole, and right back to where you had it mounted before, or had the shock mounted. And again with the rear, you're going to do the same as you did with the front as far as how tight it is. It's really up to you. If you go loose, has a lot of movement. If you go a little bit tighter, it doesn't move much at all. It really just depends on how you want the suspension to perform. So far, I have not had any issues with these screws backing out with the movement of the flex extension. But just watch that, make sure that nothing's coming out. If you are having an issue with screws backing out on you, you can put a little dab of blue Loctite on the threads after putting it through the flex extension, and then run your screw in and let the Loctite set. On the back here, there are actually 2 holes for mounting your suspension. It's basically just whichever one works best for how you want your truck to be set up. Because I kind of like everything to look fairly level, I'm going to run mine in the back on the JLU. On some of the deadbolt builds that I've done, I've actually run it on the front hole. It does give a little bit less flex when you run it on the front hole, but it can help with leveling your truck. On this truck, I already have my low center of gravity set installed, which will also help with tuning your suspension because it gives you a lot of different positions for shock mounting. And just snug that down, and that's it. Now, because I am going to be doing a bit of a build series on this truck, I am going to be replacing the wheels and tires on this. I have some Proline Hyrax tires on some Endura 5-point wheels, or 5-spoke wheels. They are bead locks, just 6 screws in the back here. And I've used this before on different trucks and performance is great on it. So go ahead and get these installed back on this side. Installation is just the same as, or just the reverse of removing. When you tighten these down, you don't want to go too tight. You want to make sure your wheel has free movement, but not play side to side. If you go too tight, you'll end up wearing out your bearings too soon. Alright, do the exact same thing on this side. While we're here, do a little size comparison compared to stock there. Almost the same size, maybe slightly smaller, but a much stickier tire and softer compound. Alright, so now, one of the issues we have is it's no longer sitting level. So, now we will have to open the body up and figure out what's going on there. And it's just going to be a matter of changing your suspension mounting points. For the front, I am going to leave it right where it's at, because that is a good place for it as far as how low it goes. When you have the body on there, it tucks right up into the wheel well there, still gives you plenty of room for turning, and when you are at full articulation, you still have enough room there. Alright, but in the rear, it tucks way too much, and it's actually hitting this rear tray because it's getting way too low. So now you just get to kind of play around with installation here and different positions. My go-to is typically down to the frame first on stock suspension. The other thing you want to check for is any sort of suspension binding. Which we'll check once we get the height where we like it. So that's still sitting a little bit low. Bring it up just a little. So then we are actually going to move this back one hole on the frame. Now that sits, looks about perfect. Yep. And then post some pictures, but you get quite a bit of extra flex out of once you have these installed. Now the way to check for binding is you want to fully run your suspension one direction and try and push it down. If you feel any binding in there, which this one does not have any, you want to try it on both sides. The only binding I'm getting is the servo is actually hitting the frame, which there's nothing that you can do about that, unfortunately, other than changing your servo out, or you can also trim your frame a little bit. And on the rear, do the same thing. There's no binding there. It's also a little bit of a shot. You can see how these actually work by moving up and down. But that's it for the installation. So with this truck, because I'm using stock suspension for the most part, when you use stock suspension you don't need these, but sometimes you do. Just depends on how you like your suspension set up and what angles you have it at. But they're included with it just in case you need it. If you have any questions, leave a comment or message me. All the links to any of the products are going to be down in the description. Thanks for watching.